You are violating my territorial bubble.
What'd he do to you, Frank? Piss on your hush puppies?
Welcome to Combs Crew. This is the podcast where we talk about the films of Jeffrey Combs. We're slowly working our way through all the Jeffrey Combs movies. The last episode, we talked about Dr. Mordred for almost 2 full hours. This episode, we are tackling The Frighteners, a 1996 film with Jeffrey Combs as the villain. To introduce ourselves, my name is Dan. I'm a Jeffrey Combs fan.
I'm Jackie. I'm also a Jeffrey Combs fan.
It doesn't rhyme, though.
I'm Catherine. I'm also a Jeffrey Combs fan that does not rhyme.
And my name is Matt. I am a Jeffrey Combs fanatic.
So let's talk about The Frighteners a little bit. Basic facts. Came out in 1996, directed by Peter Jackson.
I think it was right after Heavenly Creatures. They got an Oscar nod, him and Fran Walsh. Mm-hmm. And I think Zemeckis was like, you guys can direct this. That they loved the script originally, which I think was originally pitched as a Tales from the Crypt episode.
Really?
From what I read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I from what I read, I think Zemeckis was like, this is better. This can be expanded to something larger. And we got what we got.
No, that's crazy.
That would have been a hell of an episode because this is a long movie. He said it's 2 full hours, basically.
I think so, yeah.
It has at least 5 storylines happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just keep adding storyline after storyline. So confusing for especially a first watch through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like this was the movie that kind of launched Weta, which is like Peter Jackson's special effects company that did all the Lord of the Rings special effects. I will say for 1996, there's a lot of CGI. There's a lot of invisible CGI where it's not fantastical creatures or monsters, but there's a lot of pretty good ghost special effects where it's a movie about ghosts and all the ghosts have this cool blue translucent glass-like effect and they warp the background behind them. And you don't really think of it as CGI, but I think it is actually a pretty good example.
It's a good effect.
Yeah, I thought it looked really good.
I think at the time it was kind of the biggest undertaking of CGI in a film that had, and I think it really was his studio that was able to pull it off, that they were doing a lot of stuff kind of on the fly that ended up turning into like Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wonder if any of that was good practice for like the Nazgul, you know?
Yeah, I think you can kind of see some of the germs of that, which, yeah.
Or the Ghost Army in Return of the King.
Oh, yeah, of course.
There's ghosts.
Yeah.
I guess let's get into genre. I guess I would call it a horror comedy overall.
Yeah.
Dark comedy.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's definitely dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that they were trying for a PG-13 rating, but there's a lot of death, a lot of guns. A lot of ghosts.
A lot of guns. Yeah, that's one thing I do want to talk about. It comes up so often in such weird ways.
I mean, I think an alternate title, it could have just been called Guns and Ghosts. And it would perfectly encapsulate everything that happens in the movie.
Yeah.
Because people use guns, ghosts use guns. It's a gunny movie.
It is a gunny movie.
Definitely. And also Frighteners doesn't really it's not a great name for it either. They say Frighteners like maybe once or twice.
I don't even know what Frighteners are. I think they just call ghosts Frighteners in this film. Does anyone know what a Frightener is?
I think there's that one point where, what's his face? The army general guy, he talks to Michael J. Fox and he says like, oh, you need to stop putting the Frighteners on people. Like,
yeah.
That's the Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
I forgot the actor's name.
I forgot the actor's name and the movie. So, yeah.
I rewatched the trailer because I was kind of curious about what they kind of build this as, and they really go for the slapstick kind of humor.
Emanations are normally confined to the cemetery.
You cannot push spirits around!
Although they do escape.
And there was a bunch of scenes in the trailer that aren't in the movie. That they play up Michael J. Fox with ghosts doing these kind of antics, which does not set people up for success in watching this movie, because I would say the end takes such a turn and gets so dark that I can see people kind of having expectations of what it was going to be. And
yeah, I think that was one of the problems, is it was really hard to kind of pigeonhole this movie, where it's like, it's not just a dark comedy. Like, it gets kind of graphic at times, it's not just a ghost story, because there's a lot of like personal drama and the funny stuff. And I feel like I was reading some stuff about like when it was supposed to come out was like maybe an October or later in the year release, and they had to push it up, or they chose to push it up to the summer, where it competed against the Atlanta Olympics. It competed against Independence Day. 2 weeks after Independence Day.
Yeah.
And it didn't do very well.
yeah.
I never saw it. I never saw it growing up. My first time seeing it was when we watched it, because we knew Jeffrey Combs had a prominent role. So we watched it. I went into it completely blind. I knew nothing about it besides the fact that it was called The Frighteners and that Jeffrey Combs is in there somewhere. I didn't know that Michael J. Fox was the lead, which is probably the most notable thing, because, Michael J. Fox, he's a big guy.
Yeah.
Or he was back then. Yeah.
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 That box art as a kid somewhere.
Yes.
Whether it was like a Blockbuster or what.
I was going to say, it's one of those boxes that you saw in the video store for sure. I remember seeing it on the shelf in the video store.
Well, it was such a great box, but the box also gives nothing away. Where, like, if you look at it, you have no idea what it is. Like, they kind of give away the cool wallpaper gag, which still holds up after all this time. It's still a really cool visual effect. But aside from that, you don't really have a indication as to what the movie's going to be about.
Yeah. But I have a memory of renting this and loving it as a teenager. I actually think I watched this movie a lot, but I kind of had a realization that I think I went back to the video store to Visart Video, and I said, I loved this. What else is kind of like this? And they gave me Dead Alive, which is Peter Jackson's earlier one, which is one of my favorite movies. So I think that might be why I have. But I also do want to, at some point, talk about kind of what I love about this movie, because there are things that I think are pretty great.
I feel like there's like 20 horror films that everyone who's roughly our age saw on the shelf in the video store.
Yeah.
Like these like iconic covers that there's the one, you're much more versed in horror than we are, but there's the one where like, there's like a skull with its mouth open or a woman with its mouth open and there's like a skull inside.
That's Dead Alive.
That's Dead Alive.
That's Dead Alive!
Yeah.
Oh my God. But the box is it's like the White Album of horror films, where it's just like a white sheet and you can kind of see a skull kind of imprinted through the sheet, and it says The Frighteners, and it has the worst tagline. It says "Dead Yet" on top. It's so stupid. I hate that.
Yeah, that's not a great tagline.
What does that even mean? Like,
yeah, they could
even in the context of the film.
Yeah, they could have gone with like "You're Next." At least that would make
a
little more sense with the plot. Feels really lazy. It's a lazy tagline.
Yeah,
even Scared to Death or something.
Yeah,
Heart stopping.
Yeah, heart-stoppingly good.
That's good. There you go. I mean, let's talk general impressions. I never saw this as a kid, so I have no nostalgia for it. I just find it kind of strange. It reminds me a lot of Men in Black for some reason, where Men in Black is like a sci-fi comedy.
Yeah.
And it mixes sci-fi and comedy like kind of perfectly. And it has also like a few really big names, which this film has too, with Michael J. Fox in the lead. But Men in Black, I think, is legitimately funny, and the sci-fi stuff is legitimately interesting. Whereas this film is like a horror comedy. It's not really laugh out loud funny when you watch it now. It's kind of like uncomfortable funny, slightly.
Yeah.
Hard to pin down why it's not laugh out loud funny. And then the horror stuff, it gets dark, but it never really gets that scary, So,
Yeah, and there's not really that much gore. And I know, like Jackie mentioned earlier, there was something about the rating of the movie where they were like on the fence between the MPA between a PG-13 and an R. And it feels like in some parts they went for it and some parts they didn't. But you're kind of left with a horror movie that's almost for kids, but definitely not for kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was actually when Peter Jackson found out that they were going to get an R rating. He went back, and that's what we find out happens to Dammers. They reshot that to push it a little bit more, because he kind of knew that their rating was already shot. So
I still love that they did that, because I actually went and looked for the original shot, Because that's
Yeah.
perfect. Like, oh, did he maybe get robbed of like a dramatic death or something? I don't know. But
It's
no,
the opposite,
yeah,
yeah.
it's super boring. He just gets shot in the chest and is like thrown backwards, and then you never
Yeah.
see him again. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but it makes you. It's almost like I wish that they had decided a little bit more what it was going to be, and if they were going to push it, they had just really pushed it, and it had been a little bit more consistent. But yeah,
It happens.
Yeah, but Kat, you said there are a few things you loved about it before, right?
yeah. So that's I do really, and I still really love the style of it. It is a really gloomy movie, but there are great kind of unkempt cemeteries with weird, metal gates outside. There's a really great creepy mansion set. I like a lot of the sets a lot. The dinner scene where they go to the like almost the Ren Fair restaurant is such a weird choice, but
Excalibur restaurant.
Yeah, but I really love that. And being shot in New Zealand, a lot of the scenery is really great, but I actually do really like the kind of gloomy atmosphere that hangs over everything, and then a lot of the creative choices. But I think that's just really like Jeffrey Combs's performance, I think, for me, makes the movie. It really does.
Oh my gosh. No, I remember when we watched this with you, it was my first watch of it, and we were waiting for Combs to show up. And it took 40 minutes for him to show up. And man, the payoff was insane.
Yeah.
Combs just busts in, giving it his all.
Yeah. We knew nothing about it. And so we didn't know what to expect from his character.
Yeah.
And it's the craziest over-the-top performance we could ever hope for. You mentioned his film in New Zealand because it's Peter Jackson, and that makes sense. It took me a minute to make that connection because the movie, they don't say exactly where it takes place, but it's supposed to be America somewhere.
Yeah.
But right off the bat, it's in some seaside town with like a big shipping port, and there's all these houses built into the mountains that the mountains dramatically dive into the sea. And as soon as you see this town, you're like, that's not any town in America that I know of.
Yeah, it's like these big volcanic cliffs and stuff. And you're like, okay.
I thought maybe Alaska, but
possibly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when you find out it's in Wellington, it goes,
it's of course
Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
It's just funny how they tout it as like an American town.
Yeah.
They were trying.
I will say, I mean, Peter Jackson's, I think he's really good at genre and he knows horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you mentioned, like, I think he plays with genre a bit where, I mean, he assembles the haunted house set and it's like a perfect haunted house. He's got some really good cemetery sets. Like, he knows how to do his genre imagery.
Yeah.
I think my issue is that the plot is complicated enough that it kind of pulls you out of that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like a movie like Evil Dead is also just playing with like dumb horror genre imagery. But it's so simple that you get to just enjoy it.
Yeah.
This makes you, especially in your first watch, this makes you think. Like there's a lot to take in.
Yeah. I also feel like this movie is slightly deceptive in the way it presents information to you. Especially like the teaser. We mentioned the box so much, and from the teaser at the beginning of the movie, they definitely give you that wallpaper, that stretchy person attack imagery. You find out later, like, maybe it's not quite what you think is happening in that initial part, but it feels almost it feels like they're holding stuff back from you. It's almost not the most forthright movie initially.
It feels like it's cheating at times, or it is trying to like swerve one way to get your expectations, but then it doesn't really explain it. So you're kind of left feeling like stuff doesn't fit together.
Yeah. We should do a shorter walkthrough than we did with our Dr. Morgan video.
I mean, it's pretty simple. Like Michael J. Fox's character, his name is Bannister. He's kind of a con man that stakes out cemeteries or people in this town, convinces them their houses are haunted to make money. He has the ability to see ghosts because of a traumatic accident in the past, and he befriends some ghosts that assist him in this con. You know, the ghosts are funny. It later turns out there was a trauma with his wife that made him see the ghosts.
But to back up, the movie starts with a ghost assaulting this woman in a creepy mansion.
Yeah, that's
the woman we find out is Patricia. Her mom shoots the ghost and gets rid of it, we immediately this is setting the theme of so many characters, because we immediately go into a newspaper office, which is pretty much just set up to give us the information that there's been a series of heart attacks. They refer to it as the Shadow of Death or the Grim Reaper. Later, they refer to it as the Soul Collector. So that's already. And then they set up that in 1968 in Fairwater, where it's set, Bradley Bartlett was a serial killer who killed a bunch of people. So that's just this dump. But they even, Miss Reese Jones is the newspaper woman. Steve is the guy writing the article. We don't need to know really who these people are.
Yeah.
But we have it. All of that is established. And then we get to the funeral where we meet Frank, our main character.
A strange thing about the beginning is if you don't pay attention at the very beginning and absorb every detail, you get left in the dark later on.
Yeah.
So at the very beginning, as you mentioned, they talk about how Johnny Bartlett killed, I think, 13 people or 12 people in a
12,
massacre. 12, yeah. But they also mentioned at the beginning that he was aided by this character named Patricia Ann Bradley.
Yeah.
And they say that at the very beginning that she helped him kill all these people. And it's not unambiguous. But then you don't really see this character for much longer. And if you forget that detail, it really kind of confuses you towards the end. And on a second watch, it's very strange because I guess to spoil the end of the movie, you find out that Patricia...
Yeah, spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers for 1996. At the very end, you find out that this Patricia character is evil. But then at the very beginning of the film, they tell you that she killed 12 people with Johnny Bartlett. And on the second watch, it almost feels like the film is spoiling itself because they say it unambiguously. Yeah.
Well, they try and hide it. They try and make it seem like, oh, she was only like a accessory or something. And when you meet her as her adult self, she's like apologetic or, you know, at least trying to act apologetic.
Well, and the first time we see her, she's being assaulted by the ghost in this really violent, she seems terrified. So that's the cheat, is the reveal, like, is this something they do for fun? Because it's a very intense, she's screaming no and running away, and he's popping out of the carpet and strangling her, and it doesn't fit at all with what we find out is happening later.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, like, after that, as Matt said, they kind of set up that Bannister is like a con man who is fooling people into paying him by fooling them into thinking that their houses are haunted, and they hire him to clean out the ghosts. That could be a movie in itself. I think that's that's a good premise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so we meet who is going to become the love interest. So there's first a scene where Frank, his driving is insane. Every time he's driving,
He's a very bad driver.
There is a flashback where they refer to him as possibly being drunk. Frank kind of acts like he has a substance abuse problem the whole movie, although it's never really addressed. But the way he walks is this really kind of loose-limbed, like he stumbles a lot, and whenever he gets behind the wheel of a car, he immediately starts like jumping over curbs, and
he's really bad at keeping a car upright. Yeah. He's great at flipping cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's presented. There's a scene early on where he like comedically runs over some guy's fence and like smashes his garden gnomes, and you're supposed to
Bloodzo.
Yeah. It's played as a comedic scene, but really it's like, wow, he could have killed somebody. It's not funny at all.
And it was all spurred from him like bending down to grab one of his like business cards, I think.
Yeah.
Not like it, you know, something abnormal happened. Like he made a horrible decision to like not pay attention.
Well, especially after you find out what his trauma later is, it's even more ridiculous that he would take his eyes off the road.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. You would think he would want to be like maybe slightly more careful or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, I mean, this character is played by Michael J. Fox, who I think is inherently like a lovable scamp type of actor, where he's very lovable. And this was his last motion picture. I guess we should talk about that. His last.
I think he did one more. He did one more.
Well, after this, though, he took a long break. Right? And he was in a sitcom. And he's kind of sad in this film. Like, he still has the lovable scamp energy, but he also has this like middle-aged drunken regret aura about him, and you kind of like feel sad whenever he's on.
Yeah.
And he dresses like Columbo, and he drives a Columbo car.
Yeah.
He really does, yeah.
And his mannerisms are even kind of Columbo-ish, where he's like
kind of
disheveled.
Well, and so another thing that I think I really liked as a teenager is I do really like, we meet Dr. Lucy Linsky.
Yeah.
And
Great
this is also kind of its own storyline that could be a movie. She is, she works at the medical center, and she is sent to the creepy mansion to meet Patricia and kind of find out what's going on with her. I do love Patricia's mom's character, where she tells Lucy exactly what's going on. She kind of tells Patricia was guilty. She says it was cold-blooded murder. I could put her in the institution, but I don't. But she's also such a raging bitch that you just don't trust her. Because I love the first thing Lucy says, I work at the medical center, and her response is, no, you don't. I know everybody there. And she has to be like, well, I just started working and this is my assignment. So she goes in and meets them. And then it's revealed that the fence that Frank has completely demolished and almost killed people is the house where Lucy lives with her husband, Ray.
Yeah. And that's when we're introduced to his con artistry, because he comes in. Frank has been littering the town with his business cards, basically. He goes to funerals. He gives everyone his business card. So she has his card saying, and it says he's like a paranormal investigator. He can purge ghosts or something. So he comes to her house and does his act. On a first watch, it's a little confusing because at this point, you don't know he's a con artist at all. And they don't reveal his name. You see him come in, you see him purge the ghosts. And then they do an interesting kind of cinematic device where like they repeat this entire scene at another house, except the second time, you know that he's a con artist, and you see him do the same act.
Yeah.
But now, you know that he's got these two ghost friends who are actually like pretending to haunt the house.
Yeah. And also the owner of the house has a newspaper revealing that he's a con artist. And he's like, whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at Lucy and Ray's, part of his exorcism of the house is one of the first, he pulls out a handgun out of his bag.
The first gun.
And she recoils. And then he starts squirting. He's like, oh, don't worry. But it looks like a real handgun. He starts squirting holy water with this like like this weird noise. Why is that part of his act?
Well, he seems like he's kind of a troll in it too.
Yeah.
The way he like trolls these poor people. Like even the end of his exorcism, whatever you want to call it, is he produces a tiny little bag full of ghosts and then proceeds to flush it down your garbage disposal, which probably ill-advised. Like that's very suspicious. You should be suspicious as you're watching this, I think.
The first time we see him do his act, it's with Lucy, Dr. Lucy and her husband, Ray. Shortly afterwards, Ray dies suddenly of what they think is a heart attack. And you see Ray's ghost approach Frank Bannister, and he's like, oh, I'm dead. And he's asking him what's up. And Frank knows exactly what happens after death. Frank is like, oh, you should have gone to the light.
What is happening to me?
Well, Ray, you appear to be dead.
Don't say that. That is impossible. I'm in the prime of my life. I work out every single day. My wife's a goddamn doctor.
Why didn't you take the corridor?
What corridor?
The corridor of light. The passageway to the other side.
But you didn't go to the light, so now you're a ghost for 12 months or something. Like, in 12 months, you'll have another opportunity to go to the light. Which
That makes sense.
I like the way this movie actually portrays what happens when you die. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
Just a big vortex.
Yeah. And that becomes kind of the next big arc of the film is there is a Grim Reaper looking ghost, which is killing everyone in the town. Well, not everyone, but one at a time. It's killing people in the town. They all die of some mysterious heart attack type. They die suddenly by some heart failure, and they describe a little bit that like their arteries are clean, but they just die of heart failure. Frank, Michael J. Fox's character, can see a number carved in their head. So only he has a spectral vision of like the number 13 glowing in the victim's head.
Sorry, Ray was he saw the number 37. On
37.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of the film is like Michael J. Fox trying to find out what this ghost is, like this evil ghost that's killing everything in the town.
And at this point, we still haven't seen Combs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Combs hasn't shown up. And then there is a strange there's like a roommate sitcom-y situation with Frank and his his three ghost roommates.
It's
And
very slapstick.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh god,
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone's jaw is being like carried away by a dog. There's like
That's my favorite ghost. The judge, who's maybe like a Confederate something, who knows? But he's played by John Astin, best known as Gomez Addams.
Oh my
and
god.
Sean Astin's adoptive father. So there's an Astin connection with the Peter Jackson thing. But
It's all connected.
he's a crazy old coot that's got some ghost guns and can seemingly nearly kill his ghost compadres.
Everybody get out! Judge! Put the shooters away!
There are a lot of ghost rules established that don't make sense.
Yes. Ghost guns seem very strange. Like they work both ways, where like you could kill a ghost with it or hurt them, but then sometimes just not. Yeah.
Ghosts can walk through some walls, but some walls it can't. Sometimes there's a few scenes where Michael J. Fox kind of like elbows a ghost in the face.
Yeah.
The ghost actually gets knocked down. But then there's other scenes where he can't touch ghosts. There's scenes where ghosts can touch people. There's a scene where a ghost punches Michael J. Fox and he falls down. And then, as you mentioned, there's lots of scenes where ghosts have guns, ghostly guns, and they can kill other ghosts, or at least wound other ghosts with those ghostly guns.
That's Stuart, the nerdy ghost, when the judge starts shooting and shoots his ear, says something like, if that could have been a headshot and then I would have been done. So if you get shot in the head, apparently, there's also the drill sergeant says something of, I'm a spirit and you can't push me around the same way you push. So there's spirits are also there, and they have different rules than the ghosts, which have rules that don't make sense.
I am not one of your shitty little emanations, Bannister. You cannot push spirits around. You are scum, using spooks to put the frighteners on people. That makes me physically ill.
I love that a ghost can actually kill another ghost with a gun in this movie. And it's not presented like as a joke. It's just, you're just supposed to just take that and accept it. It's so confusing.
The ghost stuff is super confusing. I wrote a couple notes where it's like, ghosts, apparently, according to this movie, ghosts can get car sick. They get nauseous in a badly driven car.
I think I'm going to throw up.
Flies love ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
The flies will land on ghosts. So if you see a fly suspended in midair, it's a...
Flies. Why is it that flies stick to you guys like shit to a blanket?
Because they're the ghosts are kind of gross. Like, they are oozy and...
Well, as Frank describes them, they're a rotting cloud of particles. So there's that, yeah.
Great.
You mentioned this before, but Michael J. Fox's character has 3 ghost friends who follow him around, and they help him con people. One is... I forget their names. You might need to help me here. One is like a nerd, and he has big nerdy glasses, but he doesn't really do or say anything nerdy, but he just has big nerdy glasses.
Yeah.
That's the boring one. He doesn't really do anything. He's just, he has big glasses, but he's just a guy. I don't want to talk about this, but there's a black ghost.
From the 70s.
What's his name? Do you know his name?
Cyrus.
Yeah.
Cyrus. Yeah, he's from the 70s. The screenplay was written by Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, and every sentence this black ghost says is just like, my black ass is gonna do this. Your ass is this. Oh,
I'm about to go like Jesse on your ass. You know, if I wanted to get shot at every day, I'd move my black ass to Los Angeles. Find me some other black ghosts and then organize a march. The African American Apparition Coalition, the AAAC.
And by 2021 standards, when you hear his dialogue, you're like, oh my God, Peter Jackson, no.
Yeah.
There is some problematic, and the judge, we'll get to it later, has my least favorite line that I really hate in this
some
movie.
stuff that does not cut mustard in 2021.
Yeah.
Well, we can fast forward to this, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to fast forward a little bit to get to the combs.
Like, we can't Dr. Mordred this episode.
Well, there is a scene where the judge has come in to help, and in this natural history museum type setting, and sees a mummy, and he has a lot of jokes about his ectoplasm and about shooting blanks.
Looks like I ain't shooting with blanks no more.
He sees this mummy
Mighty fine woman. Good teeth.
and starts having sex with it.
They don't call me the hanging judge for nothing.
Which immediately Matt made a comment kind of about like what is the consent? Was a person's body and he's doing it. But as if that's not bad enough, you see his bottom moving in and out of the mummy case, but he finishes, I'm using quotations for that, and he says this line, "I like it when they lie still like that."
I like it when they lie still like that.
I know, it's horrible.
Why did the movie make us listen to that line?
Yeah, they could have cut that one out.
It's one thing to have him look at a sarcophagus, like you see like the golden Egyptian sarcophagus, and he's like attracted to it. That's a joke. But then he actually like follows through with full intercourse with
it's so egregiously weird and gross.
Yeah.
The only good thing about that is he does this extremely gross thing and then dies immediately.
Yeah.
Which I feel like as a filmmaker, you're probably like, this is a little bit too far. Let's get him out of here so you don't have to see him again and relive one of those jokes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because as we mentioned, ghosts can kill other ghosts in this movie with guns or with whatever. And most of the movie, they're chasing this Grim Reaper looking ghost. It's CGI. It looks like the Grim Reaper has a big scythe. And the Grim Reaper ghost kills a lot of the friendly ghosts with his scythe.
Mm-hmm.
But on a first watch, just the whole concept of like, can a ghost even die doesn't make any sense. So it's kind of confusing.
Yeah, and the way the other ghosts talk about the Grim Reaper ghost too, it's like it is this thing. You know, it's like, oh, it's the soul collector. He's here to collect souls, and once he collects them, you're gone.
That was the soul collector. And he's been taking people out since time began.
And what you find out later is it's not like the soul collector. It's just the Jake Busey character back from hell.
Oh yeah, the
So
serial
it's like kind of
killer.
incongruous, yeah.
The serial killer being played by Jake Busey is also amazing, but we don't even get that much. He's kind of in this Grim Reaper costume almost for most of the movie, and you're not clear if it's actually the Grim Reaper or the soul collector. Almost makes sense because he does seem to start collecting the ghost souls. That was another rule. It was like ghosts live in the cemetery, but sometimes they get out.
Yeah.
Is something that is mentioned.
I didn't think about this until right now, but you're right that the movie does break a few rules. And one thing that bugged me is that they establish what all these ghosts look like. And all the ghosts are this kind of spectral blue, translucent color. They're all blue. But then the Grim Reaper ghost is not blue at all. It's just like a standard, fully opaque Grim Reaper. You can't see through it. And yeah, as you mentioned at the very end, you find out that it's the serial killer that you learn about a few times throughout the film. But they don't show it in blue. And it's a small thing, but it does kind of break the rule. It's breaking the rule of how the ghosts work.
So in the restaurant scene, is that the first time we see the Grim Reaper kind of like that? And this is also another coincidence that Lucy, it feels like she asks Frank almost out on a date. It's a very date vibe. They go to this Renaissance like restaurant, and he just happens in the bathroom to run into number 38, the next victim.
I think that's the first time you see the Grim Reaper.
Sorry, I think it's a really cool effect in that bathroom scene. Yeah. There's like the Grim Reaper comes through the mirror, and you have this mirror like turn into this kind of liquid mercury almost style effect. It still looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
From so long ago.
I will say the CGI looks a little dated, but then when you remember that it's 1996, it's actually really good CGI.
There's a lot of good interaction with people too, which I feel like is really pushing it for a lot of CGI stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those films where you don't think about it nowadays, but almost every scene is real actors and then the ghost characters. Yeah. So I don't know if they filmed them together and then added the effect in post, or if they filmed Michael J. Fox just by himself and added the ghosts later. But either way, like almost every shot is a special effects shot.
Yeah.
And it's really a lot of work in this movie. They spent a lot of time.
So with the deaths, it's so weird. It almost feels like they are trying to set Frank up, but it seems like it's just coincidental that he happened to have the run-in with Ray right before Ray died, and then he has this run-in with just this random character in the men's restroom who ends up dying.
Yeah. But I think that is the key death, because Michael J. Fox's character, Bannister, he meets Dr. Lucy in this restaurant. For some reason, the restaurant is a crazy medieval times, except classier, like a giant castle where you're served fine wine by like a knight. It's
I wonder
great.
if that place actually exists. Because well, it might just be like a really fancy church that they made the interior look like a restaurant for the movie.
Yeah.
But it's well done. I want to go there.
Yeah, that place was packed too.
Yeah, and
Like
everyone,
every seat was full, so it's doing well. It's people want the medieval restaurant experience.
and people are dressed up like it is a fine dining establishment. It's a great
I'd go
model.
there in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Frank sees someone be killed by the Grim Reaper in the bathroom. And then he just kind of runs out of the restaurant. He tells Lucy he has to go. He runs out. He chases after the Grim Reaper ghost. That leads to the museum scene we mentioned before. At this point, the cops are kind of getting suspicious of Frank because he keeps showing up where these people are dying. He escapes the cops. There's a lot of gunfire again. In the museum scene, there's so many guns in this movie.
Yeah.
Just these cops open fire on Michael J. Fox in this museum. They're just shooting everything. Michael J. Fox doesn't have any weapons. He's just kind of trying to get away. So much gunfire as he
They
escapes.
destroy like a bunch of artifacts. They destroy a bunch of mummy cats.
Yeah.
And then the judge comes, and the judge has two massive, oversized, non-cowboy guns.
Yeah. And then Frank flees. And then this leads to a scene where Dr. Lucy goes into the police headquarters and they're questioning her because she was the last person who saw Frank. They mentioned previously that the FBI is interested in all of the deaths in the town and that the FBI is sending an FBI agent named Dammers to investigate. Ooh. And I think they mentioned that he's like some weird agent who has some member of some supernatural investigation squad or something. So the detective is kind of asking Lucy some questions about where she saw him last. And this is finally at the 40-minute mark when Jeffrey Combs makes his grand appearance.
Lucy, this is Special Agent Milton Dammers of the FBI.
It's where the movie really starts.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, man. And I mean, like at this point, there's already so much story that's happened. Like too much story. Like we've said that like several of them could just be like their own TV shows or movies on their own. And then in bus fucking Jeffrey Combs just bringing in like just tons more chaos, but in the best way.
And I love the way you see him too. I love the way his character's introduced where you're inside the police headquarters. There's these glass walls that divide the various rooms. And I think the shot is of Lucy and the sheriff who's talking to Lucy, but just through the glass window, you see just out of focus, Jeffrey Combs' head just come in, and he's kind of neurotic and secondary in the background.
Yeah, he's very twitchy and elusive, and he has these piercing black eyes that are very disconcerting.
He plays it like someone deeply uncomfortable being inside a human body.
Yeah.
Like it seems like something else is living inside a human form, just constantly trying to get out. But it's just Dammers being Dammers.
Yeah.
Just no eye contact, ducked head. Yeah, half the time he's like backing out of a room while he's delivering his lines. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
We should talk character design a little bit, just like his wardrobe and how he looks. Because it's hard. I mean, I didn't expect him to look like this in this film, but yeah, he has black contact lenses, so there's no irises, just like a black pit in the middle of his eyes. He has like a straight up Hitler haircut, exactly Hitler's haircut. If you Google Hitler and look at his hair. And he has prosthetics on his ears to make his ears kind of pronounced. So his ears are kind of jutting out.
Yeah, they stick out a lot. Yeah. As a slight side note, this did remind me of Dr. Mordred in that he is an expert on cults and, the occult and everything. And Dr. Mordred was also an expert on cults and sex and the underworld.
Yeah, the occult.
So there's that connection.
Especially with the whole, being involved with the police and everything, too. Yeah, there's a strange connection here that's sort of flipped.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, he's on the other side.
Right.
And then there's a scene later on where the main character is in prison for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, the whole time I was thinking, it's just like Dr. Mordred, except it's like a mirror universe Dr. Mordred.
We also get this weird character tick that immediately raises so many questions, where Dammers immediately starts kind of interrogating Lucy.
At what time, precisely, did Bannister leave for the bathroom? You.
I'm not sure precisely.
Did he use excessive amounts of table salt during his meal?
What?
Answer the question.
And he raises his voice at her, and in frustration, she raises her voice back, and he immediately starts retching enough that he has to go and vomit.
For Christ's sakes, it's really late. I can't remember that, okay? What is this?
And then he says, I have a problem with women yelling.
Sorry, Sheriff. I have a problem with women yelling.
Yeah.
And this is something that happens in pretty much any scene where it's he and Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
He raises his voice, she raises her voice back, and he freaks out. And it's so weird.
Yeah, it's just one of the many insane things that just is kept adding to his insane character.
Yeah. Every scene Dammers is in, he reveals some new character quirk or character attribute. Every single scene. And again, immediately, women yelling makes him throw up. It makes him vomit.
Also, the first time he throws up gives us one of the best lines in the movie.
Yeah.
The police chief comes to console him, and I guess he gets a little.
He touches his shoulder. The police chief is like, "Are you okay?" Yeah.
And then Combs goes,
Sheriff Perry, you are violating my territorial bubble.
"You're violating my territorial bubble." It's just so
Which just really resonates in this year,
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mistakenly said that every scene he reveals a new character attribute. It's really every shot he reveals a new character attribute.
Every single shot.
Because shot 1, he vomits because a woman yells. Shot 2, the sheriff puts his hands on his shoulder, and apparently he doesn't want anyone to touch him. He's he's super. And even before this, as soon as he arrives, I think his first line is he says, I was going to take the plane here, but I didn't feel good about the plane, so I took the train.
Yeah.
His first line is, I came by train.
I came by train. I was going to take the flight, but I didn't feel good about the plane.
That's the first thing he says when he comes into the room. I came by train. And you're like, okay, who is this? Why does he look like that?
As the villain of a movie, too. They're I think a typical thing is the hero has their story and the villain has an opposite story, but the villain's story needs to be as strong as the hero's story. He has to have his own wants and needs and stuff, and Dammers has that. You see him on screen and he is the most complete, compelling character. So interesting, just draws you in immediately.
Yeah, it's just instantly the Dammers show when he shows up.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I guess Jeffrey Combs had a big hand in sort of adding to a lot of those kind of details. I guess especially even some of the physical attributes like the hair.
Mm-hmm.
I think he even suggested the ears too.
And I know that at the very least the hair was Jeffrey Combs' suggestion.
Well, and he's been working he's undercover in various cults and sects.
Special Agent Dammers has over 20 years' experience in the area of paranormal psychology. Much of that was spent undercover with various cults and sects.
I get all the fruity cases, Mrs. Linsky.
So that is what his job is he just goes undercover. We later see kind of some hints, and I think that we'll talk about it. There was some information that is in an extended version that is cut out of the version that we watched, because it just raises a lot of questions. Like you just watch it and you're like, I want to know so much more about what happened to him, what he's been through. It seems like any cult that has existed, Dammers has been right in there, kind of. Who knows even what he's doing?
I forget where I saw this. It was some interview with Jeffrey Combs, and maybe it was for Frighteners or something. But he said once that he's very committed to having his hair cut for the role, which is very applaudable, because I know a lot of other actors who absolutely would not have had a Hitler haircut.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder, like, how did Combs go about his day-to-day life, like, in between shots, you know?
Oh, that's such a good point.
True, yeah.
A hat? I mean, I gotta know.
Yeah. It's hard to tell what was in the script versus what Jeffrey Combs brought to the role.
Yeah.
I Googled the screenplay before this, and I was kind of looking through all the key Dammer scenes. And they do mention his dark eyes. They don't mention his Hitler haircut. The scene where Lucy yells at him and he throws up, in this original screenplay, he just gets flustered and has to, he needs to splash his face with cold water. So they don't actually mention the vomiting. But they do mention
the retching makes that scene.
But they do mention that he has a problem with women yelling.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one of those characters that makes you think, because there's so much under the surface. Just that phrase, I have a problem with women yelling.
Yeah.
Well, he's got some history.
Yeah.
He's just immediately, it's like, what's this?
We need to unpack this.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then can we talk about the scene where he is interrogating Frank, and it's the two of them in that room? So Frank has not done himself the most favors, because prior to this, he saw the newspaper woman, Miss Reese Jones, had the number 40 on her forehead. So she's going to be the next. But he deals with it by screaming, "You're next," and kind of accosting her. And then as a way to try and save her, he punches her in the face and abducts her.
Gotta go.
Only to crash his car and watch her get killed in front of him. So at this point, he's kind of up shit creek.
Yeah, and it's in the car accident with her is exactly the same as the accident that killed his wife that he was also seemingly blamed for.
Yeah.
I think in that you might get a flashback there where you see a number on her head.
His wife's head when she died. That he saw a 13 on her head. Speaking of which, that was one of my favorite little bits of storytelling in the movie, is they do a thing, they show Michael J. Fox's character in the past, and he's kind of just this dick, and there's this little piece of land outside their dream house where his wife wants a garden, and she's all ready to plant that garden, and he's poured a concrete slab to have a basketball hoop out back.
Yeah.
And screenwriterly wise, it's such a great, she wants this beautiful garden, and he puts concrete all over it. And I was like, well done.
Well, and it comes back where Lucy goes and sees that he has the basketball hoop has kind of become dormant, and he's put in this beautiful garden for his wife.
Yeah, I think on the first watch I missed all that, but yeah, on the second watch it stands out a lot more.
Yeah.
And Lucy is I love this part. Lucy is at the police station when Frank is brought in, and he fully Harry and the Hendersons her.
I don't give a damn about you. I don't give a damn about anybody.
What the hell are you saying?
Go home.
He's like, get out of here. It was all bullshit. I didn't care about you at all. I
don't care about anyone. Yeah.
I guess he's trying to absolve her from getting more involved or something.
Yeah.
But you were going to talk about the scene where Dammers interrogates Bannister.
Well, I kind of want to talk about the way the scene is shot. There are some great zooms and close-ups on on Dammers' mouth, but I think this has my favorite line where Dammers is he is saying that Michael J. Fox has killed everybody. He gives him a 28 body count.
Ray Linsky. You have an argument with him, 3 hours later, dead. Magda Reese Jones. We know you didn't like her.
He thinks Michael J. Fox has done this psychically, that he's figured out how to kill people with his mind. Yeah. And it's the first kind of inkling that Dammers has an interest in this. But he says, kind of, what about the guy at the restaurant? That guy didn't have any connection with you. And then he says, what'd he do to you, Frank? Piss on your hush puppies?
But what about the guy in the toilet? What'd he do to you, Frank? Piss on your hush puppies?
I love it. Yeah.
He's so good in this scene. Where he
yeah.
tries to sit down at one point and sits for maybe a half second, and Combs is like back up again. It's these extreme close-ups. He goes in this really long description story about these telekinetic people in Russia, and that's what Frank's doing. It's just great. It shows like the full extent of his kind of obsession and neuroses.
Yeah, he starts by talking about some, I forget the name of the character, but he talks about some woman he'd heard about in the past who killed a frog with her mind. And he says how like she focused on the frog and the frog's heart exploded.
Have you ever heard of Nina Kulagina? March 10, 1970. Nina Kulagina, with the power of her mind, stopped the beat of a frog's heart.
It seems like Dammers is convinced that Michael J. Fox has this ability.
And then he reveals that he's wearing a lead vest.
I'm wearing a lead breastplate!
I love that. Yeah.
It's so good.
For like protecting himself from this psychic heart attack, which I guess does lead protect you from
lead. It's lead.
I don't know. It seems very silly. I don't know.
Again, as someone who never saw this film as, when it came out, I was actually hoping for a really crazy twist and that we would learn that Michael J. Fox was in fact responsible for all these deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been really crazy and interesting if he was right. But in this scene, he's saying to Michael J. Fox, is like, you were at the scene of all these deaths. Bless you.
Oh, sorry.
He's like, and Frank Bannister says, like, oh no, it's I saw the Grim Reaper do it. Like I can see he comes clean. He says, I can see ghosts. I've seen the Grim Reaper come and kill all these people. I can see it.
I can communicate with the other side. I can see spirits. I don't know why.
And then Dammers is like, oh, you're fooling yourself into thinking that it's the Grim Reaper. It's actually you. That's you projecting your murderous impulses.
This death figure is nothing more than a homicidal alter ego that satisfies your compulsion to kill.
No.
Every time you want to take somebody out, death figure suddenly appears, does the job for you. It's your rational mind's way of absolving yourself of guilt.
No.
And again, Jeffrey Combs is good enough that he actually fooled me as an audience member into thinking that there might be some grand twist where Frank Bannister is in fact the killer.
We have 28 unexplained deaths here. You know what I think? I think you are involved in each and every one of them.
Which would have been really cool, actually. Because
and make some more sense.
Because then I was imagining the rest of the film being flipped in its head, and Frank is on the run, and Dammers is hunting him down with Lucy, but that never happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, Frank Bannister, he kind of believes it too, and he kind of puts his head in his hands. Yeah, and Dammers is like, he thinks he's trying to stop his heart. He's like, you're trying to kill me right now, aren't you?
Well, and then he rips his shirt open like he's Superman to show that he has this lead vest. It's
You're doing it right now, aren't you? You're trying to kill me, right? Now. Get it, Bannister.
I'm wearing a lead breastplate!
Which is great because it's not even the only time he rips his shirt open to reveal something in this movie. I think any Combs role you have where he rips his shirt open twice is a good role.
It's pretty incredible. Also, that police station where he's interrogating Michael J. Fox, that room is like purple and green.
Yeah.
It's very...
Oh, it's New Zealand.
I guess so. I mean... It's very... I wouldn't place it as a police station, but hey, maybe it is. Maybe they have really colorful police stations down there.
Well, it's like an interrogation room, but there's also like a weird whiteboard that has like...
It's like maps on it.
Yeah, and then the color scheme, it's all very...
Did you say maps on the wall? That's another... Another Mordred connection.
Yeah.
Is this podcast just us comparing other Jeffrey Combs roles to Dr. Mordred?
That's going to be what we do.
All points go back.
It's always going to come back to Mordred.
Yeah.
And again, like Mordred, he is convinced of Frank Bannister's guilt.
Yeah.
And that's another Mordred connection where in Dr. Mordred, the cop is convinced of Dr. Mordred's guilt. So Lucy helps Frank Bannister escape prison. And then they kind of turn Dammers, sadly, they kind of turn him into like more of a straight villain, which I found a little disappointing because ultimately Dammers is trying to solve these murders, and I don't think he's necessarily evil. He thinks Frank Bannister is guilty, but I'm kind of on Dammers' side because Frank Bannister's character has been at the scene of like 13 different mysterious deaths, and it is actually extremely suspicious.
Yeah.
He's really bad at looking innocent. He's always in the wrong place. He's very dodgy about everything. Even when he comes clean to Dammers is like, I don't believe that. I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
But this is also a pivot for Dammers where he becomes fixated on Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, he almost stops trying to even really catch Frank, and he seems much more focused on abducting Lucy and kind of stopping her from helping Frank, but also gets into some weird stuff with his he hates women yelling, and at one point he says to her, "You're all the same." So you get into this weird, his issues with women, kind of as it becomes his kind of driving force.
Yeah, in the last third, I would say, Frank has a plan to basically kill himself to turn into a ghost.
He's like, I need to stop him as a ghost. And his plan is to shoot himself in the head.
He's like, go away, Lucy. I got this.
That's right, yeah.
And she's the one, it almost does feel like Dammers becomes, Lucy is extremely like capable and competent. So she comes up with the plan, and she takes him to the medical center where she works, I think.
Yeah.
But it almost does feel like Dammers then becomes, she's so rational and often makes the right choices. But I just love that scene where Frank's like, well, I guess I have to shoot myself in the head. Like, there's nothing else to do.
Yeah. But I think that the shift in Dammers, too, like, is the way they just shoot him. Every time he comes up now, it's a jump scare.
Yeah.
There's like this big, strum of music, and he's just there, and it's very jarring. And it's like, it's the full villain. It's like what Michael Myers would get.
Yeah. There's a great scene where Michael J. Fox is being frozen, and Lucy's like in the window, and she moves her head, and like the window reveals that Dammers is right behind her, and he's just that stare.
And again, I was looking through the script trying to see, like, I think they kind of had to change the way this was filmed and the way it was written just based on how scary and unhinged Jeffrey Combs was in this role.
Yeah. I can see it.
One little anecdote about this film, apparently, I learned this on IMDb, is that Michael J. Fox broke his foot while filming.
Oh.
And then, like, I guess while he broke his foot, they had to stop filming for like a week or something, or a month. And they mentioned that Peter Jackson like took the opportunity to rewrite the script a bit.
Always a good sign.
Yeah.
I know, and I feel like half of that is them just being like, we gotta, like, Jeffrey Combs is going fucking hog wild. It doesn't make, we need to turn him into something else.
The Combs is unhinged. Actually, one thing I learned too is, I guess Peter Jackson, he like sought Combs out.
Yeah.
That he liked Combs so much, and he liked Combs' work in it so much that they asked him if he was available, and he was, of course.
Brilliant choice.
Yeah, so he's a fan of Combs too. So Peter Jackson, if you're listening, you could join the Combs crew too.
Yeah.
Hop on this Zoom call, Peter.
I would love to have Peter Jackson as a guest.
But we only want to talk to him about Jeffrey Combs.
So plot-wise, Frank, he's in cryogenic. He's frozen himself and kind of temporarily killed himself. Lucy needs to revive him after, I think it's like 9 hours. That's the plan. It's like, or something.
No, I think it's like 9 o'clock.
9
So
o'clock.
I think
It's
it's
like
like
20 minutes.
It's like 20 minutes.
But that makes a lot more sense than 9 hours.
Yeah, that definitely.
9 hours, 20 minutes, same thing. I was only off.
I think Dammers' plan is to stop her for like 9 hours so that Frank will be well and truly dead.
And that's why Dammers kidnaps her. It's because he doesn't want her to revive Frank, I guess.
Yeah.
Could have just arrested Frank, but it's a little convoluted actually. But he throws her in he takes the police car and throws her in the police car.
He seems really focused. Oh, this is also though, she picks up a medical tool to kind of be like, I'm going to fight you. And he pulls out an Uzi.
An Uzi. I love it.
It says start the thing of Combs or Dammers, sorry. hiding unexpectedly large things in his trench coat.
Yeah.
Because he pulls out this enormous gun.
Yeah.
And then later, as he's kidnapping her, they get into the police car and he pulls out this giant, like, hemorrhoid pillow donut that he's going to sit on. It's just I like that he's almost like Felix with like a bag of tricks. It's just this weird coat.
Again, I feel like every shot they introduce a new character trait.
Yes.
And earlier on, he pulls out a pistol when Frank is escaping from the prison. And I think Frank takes the pistol. And you don't know where he gets his Uzi from. It's implied that he just has an Uzi.
What else does he have in there? Who knows?
And it's just...
Well, when Frank gets the gun is a great moment, too, because Lucy is knocked out Dammers. And then Frank kicks Dammers when he's on the ground, and the gun pops up like it's like a prize from a game. It's so weird.
I know. I almost hope that they accomplish that with like
a little string.
No, I hope Combs just like tossed it up.
Yeah, it's wild. So, and it's funny too, because he's an FBI agent, and an Uzi is... You don't expect an FBI agent just to whip an Uzi out of their jacket.
No.
That's why he had to take the train. He can't.
Yeah.
Well, in '96, you still couldn't.
You can fly with an Uzi. Yeah.
Again, every shot, there's some amazing quirk, and eventually it's too much for the mind to handle, and you just can't believe what you're watching.
Yeah, because he brings Lucy to the car. The car. That's where we see the hemorrhoid ring to sit on, and he brings her to.
Well, even before that, she yells, and he hates yelling. So he turns on the radio.
That's right.
And it's like this cool, like 70s, like new wave music.
Let me out now, you bastard! Let me out this gun now!
Don't you remember you told me you loved me, baby?
I looked it up.
Oh, what is it?
The Sonic Youth cover of the Carpenters' Superstar.
Oh my gosh.
And it brings him such peace. He's like so stressed, and the song comes on, and he's like, okay, I can do this.
Well, because it's another moment. He starts yelling at her, and then the second she starts yelling back, he like just completely loses it. But he turns on this song, and then all is well with the Sonic Youth Superstar.
It seems like a new character trait, because I guess it could just be what's on the radio, but it seems like he's into this like new wave post-punk music, which is so great for like an FBI agent with a Hitler haircut and an Uzi to be listening to Joy Division or Sonic Youth.
Yeah, amazing.
He drives her to a cemetery. He talks about, again, every shot, new character traits. He says, I find cemeteries so what did you say? Peaceful?
Restful?
Restful.
Okay.
I find cemeteries restful.
I find cemeteries very restful places.
And I think, Matt, okay, I think one of you had notes about this.
Well, this was one of those interesting scenes that I don't think made it. There was an extra scene that did not make it into the versions we watched.
They cut a lot out.
Yeah, at some point, Combs rips open his shirt again and has the amazing line, "My body is a roadmap of pain."
My body is a roadmap of pain.
And he reveals this, his chest is just horribly scarred. Like his nipples have been removed. He's got a Ku Klux Klan tattoo, like scarification. He's got like a weird Christian sect scarification. Actually, before that, in the extended scenes, he reveals that he was a sex slave for the Manson family in like 1969.
It was his first assignment was to go to the family and meet Charles Manson. And he says for 6 months, he was kept there as a sex slave.
That's crazy, because you saw that? Like, you actually saw the scene?
Yeah.
I Googled the screenplay before this, and in the screenplay, he has a swastika on his hand.
We saw that scene as well. There's a part where he adjusts the rearview mirror, and he has a swastika on his palm, and I think they conveniently edited a lot of this out, which makes sense in retrospect.
I think I was just looking at the Wikipedia, and the Wikipedia says that he was kind of a sex slave from the family, Charles. And I was like, that is not in the movie. I was so confused because I saw it a few places. But yeah, that scene reads really differently. He tells her that, and then he has a meltdown and he can't get the door open to the car, and he's really unhinged and kind of scary, and then he gets out and starts disrobing.
Yeah, I mean, he mentions also that he was with like the cult of Lucifer, like he participated in cannibalism.
Yeah,
he's eaten people, like, which also made me think of Dr. Mordred.
Yeah,
is that there was cannibalism in that too?
Yeah, it's the poor guy's been through a lot.
That's the shame of this movie, is he's a tortured soul, and you want and I was dying for a redemption arc towards the end, because he's obviously had like a long career full of torture where he's basically tortured himself for his job. He's ultimately trying to solve these murders.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping for a redemption arc, but instead they kind of treat him as just like a slasher villain until the very last scene, which is kind of a bummer.
There's such potential for him to be misguided and to have these kind of like this tortured past. Yeah, and that's the Manson stuff kind of reframes him as a victim, which I think really complicates the story. And then, but when they take that out, I think it makes it kind of confusing why he's doing this. But he says, my body is a roadmap of pain, but pain has its rewards. The power of the mind is absolute. And then he starts doing these weird mouth noises.
The power of the mind is absolute.
And so he's trying to, like, you get the sense that he came not so much to solve the murders necessarily, but because he suspected that Frank had unlocked the psychic ability, and he wants to do that as well.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really good read. I didn't catch that at all, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It explains why it's there. Because, again, this whole scene, I'll say, kind of doesn't make sense. If he wants to get Frank, he could just arrest him. Frank is frozen at the moment. Instead, he takes Lucy to this graveyard. You don't know exactly what his plan is, except to stall Lucy so she can't revive Frank.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as you mentioned, he's outside. He's doing these psychic mouth noises. It's like, what exactly is he trying to do at this very moment? I'm not quite sure.
Well, and what does he really want Lucy for? Like, why is it necessary for her to be locked in the back of the car while he does this?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Ghost Frank shows up and starts driving the car, but Dammers is convinced that he has Jedi mind powers, and he is moving the car himself until,
I'm doing this? I'm doing this? I'm making the car move with the power of my mind? Yes!
Until he realizes that the car is just driving away, and then he goes, "Oh shit!" and he kind of chases after it.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good little joke. Actually.
Yeah.
Another problem with Dammers being the villain is that this movie has too many villains.
Yeah.
Early on, like, they introduced the serial killer character. I need to look up his name again.
Johnny Bartlett.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
So Johnny Bartlett is the serial killer. We see the Grim Reaper ghost, but until the very end, you don't know that's Johnny Bartlett. So it seems like there's kind of two villains, and then Dammers is.
Yeah. Well, and Patricia.
Yeah.
Patricia is also revealed to be, and I feel like that was also, like, I really love the creepy mansion, but every time we go back there, I feel like it's like, oh yeah, this storyline's still happening. Like, this is still, and we find out that this is around the time we find out that Patricia was working with Johnny. This is also, they make reference to Starkweather, who is a serial killer who was active in 57 and 58 in Nebraska, a real life person.
Real life one.
Who had a 14-year-old girlfriend. It's a really awful case. He killed her whole family. When she came home, he had a gun and said that he was taking her family hostage. She had to go with him. They went on a murdering spree. And then afterwards, she kind of said, no, he took me hostage. I was trying to keep my family safe. I didn't know they'd been killed. But he said, no, she knew all along. And he was given the death penalty, and she spent years in prison. So it's also creepy that they kind of model this relationship off of a real life story where a 14-year-old girl was kind of had awful things happen. But then make that character be as complicit and awful as this. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. Again, I missed this on the first watch completely. On the second watch, you learn that Patricia, from the very beginning of the film, they say that Patricia helped Johnny Bartlett. They say that clearly. And then throughout the film, they're trying to make the case, oh, you were just a kid then, he was influencing you.
Yeah.
Like you're a different person now. Like you've grown up. Like you deserve a second chance. And then it is kind of gross that the film's ultimate message is like, no, she's actually. It turns out she actually is.
Yeah, she's terrible.
She's as evil.
Just as bad.
Just as bad.
Yeah.
So there's like a final series of scenes is Patricia and Johnny Bartlett's ghost in this old hospital building, I think. And
they Frank and Lucy now have Johnny's ashes, so they go to this old abandoned building where they've done the massacre, because there is a chapel there, and the ghost rules. There's just the vortex to heaven that you can.
The vortexes hang out in chapels.
You just have to chuck it in.
And like there's a tone shift here, because for a while it just turns into like a straight up slasher movie.
Yes.
There's a lot of just like sneaking around corners, and it just feels like an 80s slasher, which is fun. And I really love the set piece of that hospital. They do these really great flashbacks with Michael J. Fox kind of inhabiting the time of the original murders, and then, they'll hit a wall and turn back into the present time. And it's a really fun visual thing to watch.
They do a great job with that.
And at this point, Dammers has somehow followed them there, and he's a straight up slasher villain at this point, where he sneaks up behind Dr. Lucy, and there's a jump scare where he jumps out and grabs her by the face.
Yeah, it's violent too. Like he slams her against a wall.
Yeah, I think he
Yeah,
and she runs away.
And this is where he says, "You're all the same" to her.
You're all the same.
Where he has become just fixated on the fact that she is a woman, and she has kind of double crossed him, and it's more about like revenge, seemingly at this point.
Yeah, and I will say, when I looked at the screenplay, we're going to talk about Dammers' ultimate death, but in this original screenplay that you can find by Googling Frighteners screenplay, Dammers is already dead by this point. What happens is, when you first find out that Patricia is evil at the mansion, Dammers comes to the mansion, knocks on the door, holds up his badge, says, Milton Dammers, FBI, and then Patricia kills him right then. Even before they get to the hospital.
Interesting.
So it's almost a minor redemption arc for Dammers, because he holds up his badge, he says FBI, he's investigating stuff, and then Patricia kills him. But then in the final cut, Dammers doesn't die then, he follows him to the hospital, and again he's like stalking through the hospital, just attacking the main characters like a straight up villain.
Yeah.
And again he pulls out Frank Bannister is trying to dispose of Johnny Bartlett's ashes.
Well, he drops the ashes, and Dammers picks it up, like he catches it midair. And Michael J. Fox is trying to stop him, like, no, we need to, put this in sacred ground. And Dammers for some reason, really thinks that like anything that Michael J. Fox is obviously, the wrong move. So he just smashes the urn right then and there.
Spills out.
Well, he's still convinced that it's all kind of this manifestation of Michael J. Fox's like insanity and projection. And, stuff, and so he kind of says like, oh yeah, let me guess, you have to put this in, and like, oh, it would be the worst thing if I were to open and spill it. And that's what he does. And
let me guess. You have to get these ashes to consecrated ground in order to destroy the forces of evil.
Give me the goddamn urn, Dammers!
Under no circumstances must these ashes ever be released.
No!
Oops.
Then we get one of the great lines where Frank Bannister says, "You're an asshole." And Dammers goes, "I am an asshole. With an Uzi."
Yes, I am. I'm an asshole.
With an Uzi.
body. And again, for the second time, he whips the Uzi out of his coat and shoots Michael J. Fox. Like, it's kind of strange because I swear to God, he shoots Michael J. Fox like 10 times. I guess every shot connects with his arm.
Or like his shoulder.
Or his shoulder and his arm. Because Michael, I can't describe how crazy it is watching Jeffrey Combs just shoot Michael J. Fox with an Uzi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strangely, it never comes up again. He's fine. Apparently the Uzi shoots like BBs because
he gets up
doesn't do
again,
much.
and Dammers, it tells him to face him, because he doesn't want to shoot him in the back or anything. So Michael J. Fox, he faces him slowly, and he sees that Patricia is right on the other side of him. So he plans to just drop down straight to the floor. And as he does that, Patricia shoots the shotgun right into Dammers, which just shoots his head right off. In an amazing visual where his head is instantly like a ghost head.
Yeah.
And I think
it's cool.
I think, Kat, you mentioned this, that once they couldn't get their PG-13 rating, they added a few things in just, why not? And one of them was blowing Jeffrey Combs' head right off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a great shot, and it is.
So glad, yeah.
Oh yeah, you get like the stump and everything, like this gory stump in this ghost head. It's a really cool effect.
It's a great last minute add-on, and I hope Combs likes it. I mean, I'm sure he has opinions on it, but it's so much more exciting than what the original shot was.
Well, this movie changed a lot because again, in the screenplay, Dammers was dead long before this. If you look on YouTube, you can find his original death, which was he gets shot in the chest and just kind of flies back, and that's it. It's a little dull. And then in the final cut, his head gets blown off. So they have at least 3 different deaths for this guy.
Yeah.
But with the rating thing, I guess this was meant to be a PG-13 film. For some reason, I guess the ratings board is being really difficult with this film. And Peter Jackson kept cutting stuff, hoping to get a PG and PG-13, and they kept giving it an R. And they went back and forth like 30 times. And he just, no matter what Peter Jackson did, they wouldn't give it a PG-13. It's almost like, if you read this online, like it sounds like he thinks the rating board had something in for him. Like for some reason
But there was just some much
grudge,
like gun violence, and death.
So finally, once Peter Jackson realized that an R rating was inevitable, he said, "Whatever, I'm going to lean into it." And he actually made the Dammers death more violent. He's like, "Whatever, if it's an R, might as well make some shit more violent."
Amazing,
and that's where the final Dammers death came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I kind of wish that we could almost go back and see what the movie would be if they had just been able to commit to an R rating and not worry about it, like what kind of violence could have been. But yeah, I feel like once Dammers is so much more of he feels so much more of a threat, and he feels so much more interesting than I think Johnny Bartlett and Patricia. I mean, those are some great scenes, but yeah, it really, once he's gone, it feels like the rest of the movie kind of wraps up. There is a great scene how Frank gets rid of Bartlett and Patricia. So Lucy is still there, and they kind of all end up. Are they down in like the basement or because Frank has fallen through?
He's fallen through numerous floors.
He's been shot by an Uzi and fallen through like 5 floors of an old decrepit building and is lying bleeding out.
Fine.
And he's fine. He's still kicking. Lucy finds him. Patricia and Bartlett show up. Does Patricia kind of finish the job? She
chokes him with her shotgun. It's pretty gruesome.
And so then this is also Bartlett has Lucy pinned down to the ground. So this is a ghost who's able, or maybe he's a spirit, but who's able to hold her down physically.
It's one of the really hard parts of the movie is that there's no real set ghost rules. So like you can elbow a ghost sometimes, but a ghost can't touch you sometimes. But if a ghost needs to hold you down, this is also the guy through the entire movie we've seen reaching into people's chests and just stopping their hearts. And suddenly he's not doing that.
You should do that again.
Well, I wonder if Michael J. Fox when he was a ghost, attacked him, I wonder if he like removed some of that power.
Yeah.
Well, and also this is to address, they kind of explain it at the very end. There's something where Frank says to Bartlett, aren't guys like you supposed to be in hell? And Johnny's like, yeah, I got out. Like, that's just the only explanation. We find out later that Patricia has found seemingly every Ouija board within the area and has been communicating to the point that she was able to get Johnny out of. But that's just all very
Forgot about that. Yeah.
What do you know about Ouija boards?
Not a lot.
I found a whole stack of them up at the Bradley house. It looks like Patricia just got herself a direct line to her dead boyfriend as soon as she was released 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But
It was like such a cop out at the end of the movie too, to be like, this is all the Ouija board's fault, you know? And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
The way the villains are dispatched is, Frank Bannister grabs their spirit in spirit form, kind of drags them through the pearly gates into heaven. They're kind of traveling through this light into heaven. Frank Bannister makes it into heaven, but then the portal to heaven suddenly transforms to a portal to hell, and it kind of turns from a tunnel of light into the disgusting innards of some worm, and like you see these little snake mouths eating both of the villains, and then they're dragged to hell.
The visual goes all
It's cool.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes all out, and it's actually one of the things. There's sometimes in this movie, it's probably partially the Danny Elfman score, but that it feels like it could be a Tim Burton movie if it was slightly funnier.
Yes.
And then you get like the hell snakes at the end, and you're like, is this a Tim Burton movie that's just made by Peter Jackson? But yeah, it was really cool. I like the worms in hell, and it was nice. And then Frank has a nice little wrap up his kind of arc in heaven, you know, where they're like, it's not your time, and his dead wife is like, it's okay, go
Signs
back.
off on the new girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
cool.
I ship you guys, get out of here.
Yeah, and then the last time we see Dammers, which is all that matters.
Yeah.
It's at the epilogue of the film. We see Frank like having a little picnic with Lucy in front of the house that he was building with his dead ex-wife, and the sheriff comes to visit them and mentions the Ouija boards. And then as the sheriff gets back into his car, Frank says, have fun with your little guardian angel. And the sheriff's like, oh, good joke. And you see that Dammers' ghost is kind of scowling in the back of the sheriff's car.
Super grumpy.
So grumpy, yeah.
And that's in the original screenplay too. That's actually like exactly as it is in the original screenplay. So
why is he in the back of the police car?
yeah, because he's FBI and it's a small town sheriff, so I don't really understand, but whatever.
Maybe he's just in it for the ride and is going somewhere else.
And I feel like that part's an interesting reveal too, that now after the trauma of these events, Lucy can apparently see ghosts now too.
Oh yeah.
So that's good. It's something that they can bond over.
Exactly.
They can both see ghosts.
Activity. Yeah, for sure.
Because I think Lucy says, "Oh boy, Dammers looks pissed."
Yeah.
And Frank's like, "How do you see him?" And then she,
Which actually, you would think, as eccentric as Dammers is, wouldn't he kind of be jazzed to be a ghost? Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems almost like a culmination of what he wanted. He was kind of trying to find this other side or these powers, or you would think he would have some interest, but he just seems pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I think the primary issue with the film is that Dammers was never intended to be a large villain. He was intended to like be the FBI guy who is the opposite of the sheriff, who's kind of working at odds with the sheriff and suspects Frank. And he was supposed to die earlier. But Jeffrey Combs brought so much twisted energy to the role. And just all of the stuff that was in the script that was twisted, he just made it twice as twisted and twice as intense and brought so much energy that just the film has no choice but to focus in on him, and he becomes a huge villain.
I mean,
but there's kind of no reason for him to be a huge villain, but he just becomes.
But thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
It would be so much more interesting a movie, I think, if the the Johnny Bartlett and Patricia part had been a fake out, and if it actually was Frank accidentally even doing this
That'd be
and
awesome.
figuring out how to stop it, and if Dammers could have been this kind of unhinged but with good intentions person who was an antagonist, and then maybe I would love to see them like join forces to fix what was kind of broken.
Oh, for sure, because he does mention a lot of that stuff. He's like, this is a manifestation of your guilt over killing your wife and all this kind of stuff. There's a deleted scene we saw that he's talking about the stages of grief and where Michael J. Fox is in his stage of grief, and that these things always end in suicide, where it's like, if that was actually a manifestation of his thing, then they could play against each other well. But I mean, he does steal every scene he's in.
Yeah.
It is really hard to look away from Combs in this role.
And I love that they let him go so nuts.
Yeah.
Like, let him contribute so much to the character and like invent all these insane things. Like, it really makes me want to like play Dungeons and Dragons with Combs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of character would he make? Oh my goodness. I would just love to see it.
Yeah.
Reading the screenplay, you can imagine the Dammers character as he's supposed to be eccentric from the beginning, but I think the intention was that he gets more and more eccentric as time goes on, and you discover how disturbed he is. Mm-hmm. But the issue is Combs brings so much insanity to the role immediately that there's no escalation. He is bonkers from the beginning.
Yeah.
So
there's nowhere for him to go.
Exactly. Yeah. So he goes from bonkers to bonkers times 10, and it's just so much.
Well, I think a great comp for Combs in this role is like Kyle MacLachlan's Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks, where there's a lot of similar storyline where there's like this series of murders, the FBI comes into town, there's a local police that's kind of podunk, there's a universe somewhere that they exist as FBI agents who might work together on a case. And I want to see that movie so badly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely.
So we need to get Peter Jackson and David Lynch on this podcast and get him to sign off on a damn Twin Peaks comic.
You're both invited, Peter, David.
How great would that be? Yeah. Throw in a cult, throw in some psychological parapsychology. It would be amazing.
Well, to the listener to this podcast, I promise you that will happen. We will have David Lynch and Peter Jackson as guests.
Oh, yeah.
I can guarantee it.
If this pod goes on long enough, it will happen.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Well, it's like the monkeys the typewriter thing. We're like
it was the best of times, it was the blurst of times.
Yeah. If this podcast goes on infinitely, then it has to happen.
The laws of nature dictate.
Yeah.
My fan theory. So this was Michael J. Fox's last film. He may have done another film much later on, I think Jackie said. But the official line is that this was filmed in New Zealand, and Michael J. Fox was kind of bummed that he had to spend so much time apart from his family.
Yeah.
So after this, he said, okay, I'm going to give up acting. I'm going to give up film acting for a while because I want to be closer to my family. I don't want to be so far away from my family for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the official story is that the film came out. Michael J. Fox went to a screening. He saw the audience just hooting and hollering at every Jeffrey Combs scene. Just he saw the audience going wild for every Jeffrey Combs scene, and saw the audience totally silent for all of his comedic scenes. Oh. And it was just so shown up by Jeffrey Combs specifically that he said, I denounce acting. And that's my fan theory, is that Jeffrey Combs owned Michael J. Fox so badly that
he owned him out of film.
Just owned him out of film.
Well, he was a successful villain in that sense then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know Michael J. Fox is listening to this too, and if he wants to come on and
set the record straight.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is true. You just watch who would want to. I mean, it would be an honor to act against Jeffrey Combs, but you do just imagine what it would be like to be in a scene with Combs kind of making these choices, and it would be a thing to behold. And I don't think you can compete with it. I think you have to just kind of sit back and let the magic wash over you.
Exactly.
And I'll say, as I mentioned earlier, Michael J. Fox is always like the lovable scamp.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say the same is true of Jeffrey Combs. They're both petite men with generally a reserved demeanor in a way.
Like almost a soft energy sometimes.
Yeah. They're both soft energy men of roughly the same size.
And it's seemingly intelligent in their own way of... Yeah.
But I will say he out-lovable scamps Michael J. Fox, even as this insane Nazi
Yeah, Hitler haircut.
Yeah. The other villain in this is a Busey. And we're not even talking about
That's
the
true.
Busey.
If you can out Busey a Busey in a movie, like that's impressive.
Oscar. He got an Oscar for this, right? Like, I'm just going to assume that is true.
I'm not even going to Google it because obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah, maybe that's actually what drove Michael J. Fox out of film. Is Jeffrey Combs just went home with this like, with like a huge backpack just stuffed with Oscars.
Yeah,
he swept the Oscars that year.
Oh.
Best haircut, Jeffrey Combs.
They actually gave Jeffrey Combs best special effects, and they were like, "We just no explanation needed. We watched your performance."
But that's a great point, though. That Jake Busey.
Yeah,
you barely notice Jake Busey because Jeffrey Combs is so much more twisted.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, all right, whatever.
And before this film, I didn't know that was a Busey. This is when I learned that Jake Busey is a Busey, which makes perfect sense once you learn that.
He definitely has the resemblance. It's great.
Yeah.
I knew him from a few films, Jake Busey now, including Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Which is really strange because in that film he's not really Buseying at all. He's just like he's just a friend. He's like one of the friend characters.
Right.
Which you just can't have sorry, Jake, but it doesn't work.
If I had a movie and I cast a Busey, I'm gonna have some expectations of what I want. But why, it begs the question of why even bother when Jeffrey Combs exists? Because just get him in there and he's just gonna.
I'd be interested to hear Jake's take. So Jake, if you're watching this and you want to hop on the pod, let us know. We can get you in. We can discuss your role in the Frighteners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't actually said it outright, but Combs, if you have anything you wish to say or want to join in any way, you are, of course, always welcome.
Yeah.
Our door is always open.
Always.
And we got some questions about Dr. Mordred, too.
Yeah.
No matter which episode you join, we're going to just be talking about Dr. Mordred.
Oh, man. What would you guys ask Combs? My thing is, I hope Combs owns at least one lab coat in his house.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
So what was your favorite part of this movie?
Jeffrey Combs.
Maybe I ended it too soon.
Well,
Were we done?
actually going to say like what our favorite part was? Because we could also say our actual favorite part.
That's not your actual favorite part?
Well, my favorite part involves Jeffrey Combs.
Well, what is it?
It's the scene where he says, "You're violating my territorial bubble."
It's great.
Yeah.
When he delivers that line, you he's already insane, and he delivers that line, and you realize, oh, okay, we're in for some like insanity.
Yeah.
Territorial. It's just a great phrase. Territorial bubble.
Yeah, because everyone's for a personal bubble.
Yeah.
And like, oh, maybe you're.
And again, that's pretty much the first scene where you see him. He throws up because a woman yells. And then instantly afterwards, it follows the territorial bubble line.
Right.
So it's just back to back.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite scene too. It's such a great introduction to a character.
Oh, man.
It's almost like if you're trying to make a character where you want an audience to be like, what's that person about? You have a guy that's like hiding behind a wall and then just randomly gagging because a woman talked to him too loudly. It's like, what is that guy about? Like, I'm on board.
Yeah. It's unparalleled. Like, you just can't. It's so much of he's standing in the hallway and they're kind of saying like, come inside. There's one part where he starts muttering to himself and the sheriff's like, you're just muttering. We can't understand what you are saying. And it's just so funny. It's so disturbing. I feel like I think I'm probably like, I've seen this movie the most because of how often I watched it when I was younger. You can kind of just watch that scene. Like, just watch that scene.
Yeah.
It's the pinnacle, I think.
And just in terms of cinematography and just directing, I love the introduction of the character, how you just see him again out of focus in the distance, just slowly approaching the scene as it's happening.
Yeah.
Just out of focus, like through a window. He just kind of walks towards the camera.
Here comes our boy.
And you just see it, but it's impossible. It almost reminds me of, there's like a scene in It Follows where it's like there's a slow pan, like looking through a window, and you could see the It Follows monster, like just kind of out of focus in the background, but can't like ignore it. And that's kind of what Jeffrey Combs is in this. He just kind of like just stumbles into the movie and then just dominates it for a good hour.
Yeah. I want to know if the "What He Do to You, Frank? Piss on Your Hush Puppies." Like, I want to know, was that in the screenplay or did Jeffrey Combs come up with that? Because
So 2 fan edits we need. We need the fan fiction where Dammers gets a proper redemption arc.
Yeah.
And then we definitely need the fan fiction where it's Dammers and Dale Cooper investigating it.
Yeah. Oh, I want that.
And it's got to happen.
I really like the redemption idea because his whole thing is that he doesn't believe Michael J. Fox, that he thinks that it's Michael J. Fox killing everyone. But once Dammers dies and is a ghost, he should be able to see, oh, there's these other ghosts, and like these other ghosts are probably doing all of this shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And, like, maybe Ghost Dammers could go and like figure stuff out, or help in some way. Maybe
You have his whole career that he's been all of these sects and these cults and all this kind of stuff. He has this vast resource of knowledge that he's not really applying to stuff. That could be the redemption. They can't figure out how to solve stuff. He's like, I've seen something like this before, and does his thing and saves the day. I would have rather see that.
A perfect little alternative ending would be just, you could leave it as is, but have it so that when Jake Busey's ghost is killing Michael J. Fox, Dammers' ghost suddenly comes in and, he sees what's happening. And he like holds down Jake Busey's ghost as Michael J. Fox. You can even keep that part the same where Michael J. Fox drags him through the tunnel. But just have it so Dammers' ghost is the one who kind of like comes in and grabs him. And, just that one little shot would be perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I also, so for what we're going to do next, we were talking about maybe, I feel like we should do one of the big hitters, the From Beyond or Reanimator or
Castle Freak.
Maybe. Yeah. I kind of want to see Castle Freak again.
Oh man, I don't know.
That'd be a fun one to talk about. It's got some stuff going on.
I will talk about any of those.
Frighteners is big budget, so I think we should follow it with small budget. Castle Freak sounds
sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, that was one of the early ones we first watched, right? Like, I feel like that was kind of before we had even started combsing. So
it's true. It's true.
I think we're accidentally Combs crewing at that point.
Right.
We just didn't know it yet.
Combs movies were coming to us.
Yeah.
You were finding us.
Yeah.
So I've already said what was your favorite part line, so we can't end with that unless we re-record it.
Should we try it one more time?
So overall, what was your favorite part of The Frighteners?
Jeffrey Combs.
Okay.
Okay, it does make me laugh every time.
It's a good way to end it.
It's good.
I have to use the bathroom very badly.
Oh no.
Okay.
You are violating my territorial bubble.